left the Corps to bury the man I used to be beneath the red Arizona dust. I wanted to be a husband, a father, not just a soldier defined by his rifle. But when they came after my family, backing my wife into a corner and leaving bruises on my son, they accidentally dug up the very man I tried to forget. They don't know that the most dangerous man isn't the soldier on the battlefield. It's the father with nothing left to lose. When justice turns its back, just how dangerous can a man become? My name is Jake Carter. I'm 40 years old, a retired Marine sergeant. After 20 years of sand, cordite, and sleepless nights, all I wanted when I got out was a quiet home for my wife and son. So I took my entire savings and bought a small ranch in Arizona. The land was dry, the fences were shot, but it was mine. My dream was ridiculously simple: to hear my 10-year-old son, Leo, laugh his head off in the yard, instead of hearing gunfire in my nightmares. The manual labor cleared my head. Mending a fence, fixing a water pump, it felt more real than any medal I'd ever been given. Maria, my wife, seemed to have found her smile again after so many years of worry. Sometimes I'd just sit on the porch, watch the two of them, and feel like everything was finally in its right place. This was the peace that 20 years in the service had promised, but I never truly believed existed. Everything seemed to be on track, until one afternoon while I was changing the oil on the tractor, a cloud of red dust rolled up the dirt road. An old Ford pickup, the kind every local has, stopped at the gate. The man who got out looked ordinary, friendly even. I knew him instantly: Jedediah Callahan, the owner of the copper mine, the man who held this entire town in the palm of his hand. "Carter," he said, holding out a hand. His handshake was soft, but his eyes were hard as stone. "Heard we got a soldier in town." I just nodded. We made small talk about the weather, about cattle prices. Then he got to it. "It's a beautiful ranch," he said, his gaze drifting toward the mountains behind me. "My company's planning an expansion. It'll bring a lot of jobs to the folks here. I'm here to make you an offer for this land, for the good of the town." He named a number. It was an insult. I looked him straight in the eye, the same look I'd given dozens of enemies before. "Thank you for the offer, Mr. Callahan. But this ranch isn't for sale." My voice was flat, devoid of emotion. Surprise flickered across his face, so fast that anyone but me would have missed it. He retracted his smile and clapped me on the shoulder condescendingly. "You think on it, Carter. Sometimes being the hero isn't the smart play." He left, leaving a cloud of red dust hanging in the air. A few days later, I drove into town for feed. The woman at the general store, who just last week had been cheerfully asking after Maria, now just stared down at her cash register without a word. At the diner, the men who used to wave now turned away, staring intently into their coffee cups. No one threatened me. No one gave me a hostile look. They simply didn't look at me at all. The silence of an entire town was colder than any desert I had ever crossed. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a message. That night, after Maria and Leo were asleep, I stood on the porch, looking towards the faint lights of the mine. They had drawn a line in the sand, and I knew I had just become a target. The pressure didn't come like a storm. It crept into our lives like fine red dust, settling into every crack of the house. It started with small things. For a few nights in a row, right around midnight, a mine truck would come rumbling past the gate, its high beams cutting a cold slice of light across Leo's bedroom window, jolting him awake. I'd go out on the porch, watch the light sweep back and forth, then disappear into the dust. No explanation, no visible license plate, a random coincidence. By the third time, it wasn't random anymore. Then they came for Maria. She came home early one Tuesday afternoon. Her face was a mask, trying to look normal, but I knew. "They said they're downsizing," she said, her voice steady, but I could hear the tremor beneath it. There was only one clinic in town, and everyone knew Callahan funded it. They didn't just take her job, they took her pride. We lost half our income, but the final straw came on a Friday afternoon. Leo walked home from the bus stop. He wasn't crying. He just stood at the door, his clothes caked in dirt, a swollen handprint clear as day on his cheek. His eyes met mine, not with fear, but with confusion. A 10-year-old kid trying to understand why the world had turned on him. "It was Sheriff Cobb's son," he whispered, his voice hoarse. "Him and some other guys," they said. "Dad was a crazy vet." I knelt down and pulled him into a hug, but in my head, a switch flipped. Everything clicked into place. This wasn't an accident. It was a message. A cold, sharp anger ignited in my chest. I didn't yell. I just quietly reached for my truck keys. Maria grabbed my arm. "Jake, don't. I'm not going to do anything stupid," I said, and I meant it. I drove to the sheriff's station. Billy Cobb had his boots kicked up on his desk, a half-smoked cigarette in an ashtray. He saw me and gave me a lazy smirk. "My son," I started, my voice even. "He was jumped by your boy and a couple of others at school. He didn't even bother to take his feet down." He let out a long yawn and looked at me. "Kids fight. Don't make a federal case out of it. Your son called my son a crazy vet." Cobb shrugged. "So what? Ain't you a vet?" He stood up, walking around the desk toward me. His breath smelled like cheap coffee. "Listen, Carter, this town has its own set of rules. You need to teach your boy to get with the program. If you don't, next time it'll be more than a few bruises." He tapped my chest twice with his finger, an act that was both familiar and a threat. I stood there for a few seconds, looking right through him. I could see the coward hiding behind the uniform and the badge. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked away. On the drive home, I knew one thing for certain. Justice was never going to come from the badge on Cobb's chest. If I wanted to protect my family, I was going to have to write the rules myself. That night, I didn't sleep. The steady breathing of Maria and Leo beside me sounded like it came from another world, a peaceful world I had sworn to protect. I slipped out of bed and went down to the basement. The air was cool and smelled of damp earth. This was where I kept my farming tools and a few old wooden crates from the service, things I'd promised myself I would never open again. But tonight was different. I flipped on the single bare bulb, its yellow light washing over the concrete walls. I quietly pried the lid off a crate. The familiar scent of gun oil, leather, and metal hit me, waking a part of me I had tried to bury. I wasn't looking for a weapon. This battlefield didn't need more guns. My enemies weren't insurgents across a wire. They were right here, smug and certain of their power. My hands moved over the familiar objects. A military-grade compass, a pair of range-finding binoculars, a faded set of camouflage fatigues, and at the bottom, wrapped in waterproof canvas, was a Panasonic Toughbook. It was old, heavy, and scarred, but it was built to work in the worst conditions imaginable. I set it on my old workbench. I turned a corner of the basement into a makeshift command center. I pinned a topographical map of the valley to the wall, marking my ranch, the mine, the sheriff's station, and Callahan's house. It was all starting to take shape. A creak on the stairs made me look up. Maria was standing there in a thin robe, her eyes full of worry. She looked at the gear I had laid out, then at me. "Jake, what are you going to do?" I walked over and took her trembling hands in mine. The look in my eyes was no longer that of a farmer seeking peace. It was the look of a recon marine before a mission. "I won't let them touch you or Leo again," I said, my voice low and steady, "but I'm going to fight this my way. No noise, no trace." Maria looked deep into my eyes. She didn't ask any more questions. She just nodded, an act of absolute trust. She knew the man I was about to become. He was the one who had kept me alive for 20 years, and now he was the one who would keep our family safe. The war began on a moonless night. The Arizona desert I thought would be my final resting place was now just familiar, operational terrain. I put on the faded camo, moving like a ghost through the scrub brush and between the rock formations. The night wind was cold, but I felt nothing. All my senses were on high alert. I didn't approach the mine directly. I climbed to a high ridge that overlooked the entire valley. I assembled the drone. It was just a cheap civilian model I'd modified, painted with non-reflective coating and fitted with an infrared camera. It was nearly silent, lost in the sound of the desert wind. I flew it low, skimming over the security fence, heading deep into the back area of the mine where the guards never bothered to look. On the screen of the Toughbook, a horrifying scene unfolded, worse than anything I had imagined. Under the ghostly glow of the IR camera, I saw two unmarked tanker trucks backing up to a large ditch. The ditch was crudely dug and led directly to a dry riverbed that, I knew, fed the entire region's groundwater. One of the drivers got out, glanced around nervously, and gave a signal. Immediately, a thick, black, bubbling liquid poured from the back of the truck, straight into the ditch. The heat signature was so strong my camera captured it clearly. I kept the drone steady, zooming in on the license plates, then panning up to the faces of the two drivers. They weren't strangers. I'd seen them drinking at the town bar, clapping Sheriff Cobb on the back. I recorded until the last tanker was empty and gone. I had 15 minutes of high-definition video. The footage was silent, but it screamed a terrible truth. They didn't just want my land out of greed. They wanted it to bury this crime. They were poisoning the very ground they grew up on, poisoning the neighbors they saw every day. I recovered the drone and slipped away into the darkness. I had the first piece of evidence. It felt heavy on my hard drive, like an indictment for an entire town. The video was a good start, but I knew it wasn't enough. A slick lawyer could easily argue it was some third-party disposal company cutting corners, that Callahan knew nothing about it. I needed something that tied the crime directly to him. I needed evidence from the inside. I spent the next 3 days just watching, not the mine, but the personal schedules of Callahan and Cobb. A man's habits are always his biggest weakness. I discovered that every Thursday night, they drove to the next town over for a private poker game. They usually left around 7 and didn't come back until after midnight. That was my window. On Thursday night, I waited until Callahan's truck was clear of town. The sky was pitch black. I dressed in dark clothing, carrying a small pack with only the essential tools. First target, the mine office. Its security was a joke, a couple of old cameras and a cheap lock. Disabling them was easier than stripping a rifle. I didn't break the door. I used my lockpick set, and in less than a minute, the heavy metal door swung open without a sound. Inside, the air was stale with the smell of old paper and greed. I didn't waste time searching. I went straight to Callahan's office. His computer was in sleep mode. I plugged in a custom-built USB drive. A small program I wrote would automatically copy everything: emails, financial documents, and hidden folders. While I waited, my heart suddenly jumped. The crunch of gravel outside the window, followed by the sweep of a flashlight beam. A security guard, making his rounds earlier than usual. I held my breath, melting into the darkest corner of the room, my hand tight on the USB drive, ready to yank it out. The beam passed over the window and moved on. The footsteps faded. I let out a slow, quiet breath, a cold sweat on the back of my neck. My eyes fell on a digital voice recorder on the desk, the kind used for logging calls. I turned it on. The call history was long. I fast-forwarded through it, and then I stopped. Callahan's voice, cold and commanding. "Just do it. I don't care how stubborn that soldier is. Make him and his family pack up and leave. Use any means necessary." Cobb's voice replied, sycophantic, "Yes, sir. Leave it to me." I had it, the silver bullet. I copied the audio file. Just as the progress bar on my computer hit 100%, I pulled the USB, put everything back exactly as I found it, and disappeared into the night. The entire operation took exactly 12 minutes. I didn't go home. I went straight to my second target, the sheriff's station. I didn't go inside. I just had to climb onto the roof, access the telephone junction box, and attach a compact listening device. From now on, every call in and out of Cobb's office would be routed directly to my laptop. That night, returning to my basement, I felt like a soldier back from a successful recon mission behind enemy lines. I had all the ammunition I needed. Now it was time to plan the final battle. Back in the basement, I felt no fatigue. The mission's adrenaline was still pumping through my veins. Under the single yellow bulb, I laid out everything I'd gathered, like an intel analyst building a profile on a high-value target. The video of the dumping, emails from Callahan to his mine foreman about cost-effective waste disposal, the double-entry financial ledgers, one clean for the IRS, and one that detailed the dark money, including monthly security fees to Cobb's office. And finally, the audio file of Callahan's own voice, an undeniable command. It all fit together perfectly. Callahan wasn't just poisoning the land. He'd built an entire empire on lies and bribery. I knew I couldn't trust any local authorities. Going to the FBI could take months, even years, to investigate. I didn't have that kind of time. My family was in danger every single day. I needed a strike that was fast, hard, and couldn't be ignored. I went online. The old tough book connected me to the outside world. I didn't just search Google randomly. I went through old news archives, looking for names, for people with a track record of taking down men like Callahan. The first name that popped up, Sarah Collins, an investigative reporter for the Arizona Republic. Her articles were sharp, relentless, She'd once exposed a state senator's land corruption scandal. She was target number 1. Next, I went to the state's Environmental Protection Agency, EPA, website. I didn't send an email to the general inbox. I dug deeper, finding the direct email of the head of enforcement, someone with the authority to launch an immediate investigation. Finally, the Arizona Attorney General's office. Again, I bypassed the official channels and aimed straight for the email of a deputy AG who specialized in organized crime. I spent the rest of the night compressing all the videos, audio files, and documents into a single, multi-layer encrypted file. I gave it a simple name, The Red Dust Truth. I drafted 3 emails, each with a different tone tailored to the recipient, but the core message was the same. Here is proof of a systematic environmental and corruption crime happening in this valley. I attached a small piece of the evidence, just enough to pique their interest and prove authenticity, along with a promise to send the complete file upon receiving a reply. 3 emails sat in my drafts folder. 3 time bombs. I just had to wait for the right moment to hit send. Once I did, there was no turning back. The wait was the hardest part. For 2 days, I lived in a state of heightened alert, every rustle of the wind sounding like tires on gravel, every shadow seeming to move. I stayed close to the house, my senses tuned to the slightest sign of trouble. The device I'd planted on Cobb's phone line finally paid off. A call came through on Friday afternoon. It was Callahan, his voice thin and sharp with impatience. "Billy, I'm done waiting. That soldier is still sitting on that land like he owns the place. I want this over with. Tonight." Cobb's voice was hesitant. "Jed, maybe we should just offer him more money." "No more money," Callahan snapped. "This is about respect now. I want you to go over there and scare him for good. Find a pretext, anything. Say you got a tip about illegal weapons. Toss the place. Let him know who runs this valley." The line went dead. I knew they were coming. I had maybe an hour. Tops. I looked at Maria, who had been watching me, her face pale. "They're on their way," I said. "Take Leo and the dog. Drive to your sister's place in Flagstaff. Don't stop for anything, and don't answer your phone until I call you." There were tears in her eyes, but she didn't argue. She knew this was it. She hugged me tight, a silent prayer passing between us. I watched her drive away, the red taillights of our old truck disappearing into the dusk. Now, I was alone. I ran to the basement. I didn't barricade the whole house. That was pointless. I just needed to buy time. I sent the 3 prepared emails, this time with the full, unredacted Red Dust Truth file attached. A progress bar appeared on my screen. Uploading. 1%. Through a small security camera I'd installed, I saw them. 2 patrol cars, lights off, rolling slowly up my driveway. From outside, I could hear Cobb's voice yelling through a bullhorn. "Jake Carter, Sheriff's Department. We have a warrant to search the premises. Come out with your hands up." Uploading. 27%. The connection out here was slow. Damn slow. I dragged a heavy workbench in front of the basement door. I could hear their boots on the porch, then the sound of the front door being smashed open. "Clear," one of them shouted. "Check upstairs." Uploading. 54%. They were moving through the house now, knocking things over, their footsteps thumping heavily on the floorboards above me. I sat in front of the laptop, my hand on the mouse, my whole world narrowed down to that single, crawling progress bar. Uploading. 81%. A heavy boot slammed against the basement door. Wood splintered. "He's in here," Cobb yelled. "Carter, you have 5 seconds to open this door." Uploading. 96%. Come on. Another slam, and the door frame cracked. I could see the barrel of a shotgun poke through the splintered wood. It was over. Just as the door burst open and Cobb stormed in, gun raised, a single line of green text flashed on my screen. "Upload complete." I slowly raised my hands, a faint, tired smile on my face. The bomb had been delivered. Cobb and his deputies stormed in, guns pointed at me. He looked at me, then at the blank computer screen, his expression shifting from aggression to confusion. He didn't understand what had just happened. All he knew was that his prey was no longer fighting back. "Get up," Cobb roared, nudging my shoulder with his shotgun barrel. "You think you're smarter than me, Carter." I didn't say anything, just quietly got to my feet. They cuffed me, tossed the basement, but found nothing besides farming tools and an old computer. They hauled me out and shoved me into the back of a patrol car. As the car rolled away, I took one last look at my ranch through the window. It was a mess, but I felt a strange sense of peace. I had done everything I could. The next morning, everything exploded. Sarah Collins's article hit the front page of the Arizona Republic with a blistering headline, "Deadly Dust: Environmental Crimes and Corruption in the San Pedro Valley." The article included the videos, the audio clips, and the documents I had sent. It spread like wildfire. Before noon, black, unmarked vehicles from the EPA and the State Attorney General's office descended on the town. They didn't come from the local station. They came with search and arrest warrants. News vans from major networks followed, turning our small, quiet town into the epicenter of a statewide scandal. Callahan was arrested in his mine office, his old face stunned, unable to believe his empire was collapsing so quickly. Cobb was disarmed and cuffed by federal agents in his own station, in front of his entire staff. The evidence was too clear, the pressure from the public and the state government too immense. The entire network built on fear crumbled to dust in a single night. I was released that afternoon. No apology, but no charges either. My actions were protected under whistleblower status by the state's attorneys, a citizen exposing a crime when no other recourse was available. When I drove my old truck back home, I saw Maria and Leo waiting at the gate. Maria ran and threw her arms around me. Leo hugged my leg tightly, and for the first time in weeks, I saw a bright, radiant smile on his face. The story ends with the three of us standing on our porch. The house was a little banged up, but it was no longer shrouded in fear. The Arizona sky seemed bluer than ever before. I looked into the eyes of my wife and son, and I knew I had brought the war home, not to destroy, but to protect. And finally, I had won. The most important fight of my life.